Hi everybody and happy 2021. I think we're all happy to have 2020 behind us. But 2020 was another year of learning for me. I continued my reading of one book per week and learned a ton, and it seems like the more I learn, the more that I recognize that I need to learn more. So in this video, I'd like to share my top 10 books of 2020. In the notes or in the description, you can see the list of all 58 books that I read for the whole year, but I'm going to focus on my top 10. The first one was a recommendation from my friend and colleague Craig Mills called Pillars of the Earth. Fantastic read, just a fascinating story. I never thought cathedrals and Middle Ages and castles and battles could be so darn interesting, but it was a fascinating read, just fun every minute along the way. Second book would be a book about Bonhoeffer, and he was a German guy. Just didn't really know a whole lot about him, but was so impressed with his resolve. And he stood up to Hitler, he stood up to evil, he stood up to things that were happening, even though a lot of the people and his fellow Christians and pastors were going along with the times. He stood up to all of them, and at the end of the day, he was executed for his beliefs and for standing up for what he thought was right. But just a fascinating story, remarkable man, and an inspiration. Second book is 9 Lies About Work by Marcus Buckingham. Fantastic book. Really just sort of spoke to me and a lot of things that are wrong with our paradigm about work these days, and just speaks to how we can improve that. So fantastic read, love that book. I've got the hardback and marked that up quite a bit. Next book was another recommendation from a dear friend of mine, Jason Chrisman, East of Eden. That book was heavy. Man, it just caused me to think and ponder, and it was a very heavy book, but well worth the read. And the phrase that stood out to me that I remember is "thou mayest," and it's just, I don't know, the pondering our free will and how sacred that is, and how we can chart our own destiny. So anyway, fantastic book. Next one was Between the World and Me. So there were several books that I undertook to read this year in response to an invitation from Prophet and President Russell M. Nelson. And he extended an invitation for us all, members of the church and those that are not members of the church, to root out any prejudice or racism or anything like that. And so I took that invitation to heart and really sought to understand people that have lived different lives than me and have different viewpoints than me, and look deep in my heart and realize maybe I don't love some people as much as I ought to. And so I read several books as a part of trying to understand and trying to love my neighbor even more. And this was one of those, Between the World and Me, to understand the Black perspective and what some folks are going through, and the frustration and just some of the things that have been going on, especially this year, especially over the summer. So I felt like that was a deep book, and it helped me, I feel like, come to a better understanding and love more deeply. Another book that was in that same vein was The Deviance War. It was about some folks that were homosexual and just how they were treated in their quest to just be treated with dignity and respect. And it was an eye-opening read, and it has changed my viewpoint on that subject maybe more than any other book has done in recent history. And I feel like I have come to know and understand and love people that so homosexuals and folks that see things differently than I do. So highly recommend that read. Next was a book called Humankind, just an optimistic view on things. It just really took the old, a lot of people think that humans we're wicked, we're evil, and although I think we do have some of those tendencies, right, but I think what this book does is prove with historical records and sort of setting the record straight that most people are mostly good most of the time. So it was a very hopeful read. It sort of took old paradigms that I had and flipped them on their head. So fantastic read. Next couple books were very similar. One is called Postcards from Babylon, and that just really spoke to me and what is my duty as a Christian living in the world. And I think the author, Brian Zahn, does a great job of separating the church and Christianity from nationalism and from our cultural identities that we may wrap ourselves in, and help us, at least it helped me, sort of distinguish between those things that may be cultural and those things that are true Christianity. So fantastic read. Another book that was very similar was Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes. That really just opened my eyes to all of the ways that I might be misreading or misinterpreting Scripture because of those cultural filters that I've got. I'm approaching at it from a specific vantage point and mindset, and so it really just helped me take a good hard look at how I study Scripture and just to be more careful. Last but not least, here, Good Economics for Hard Times. This was written by a husband and wife duo, recipients of the Nobel Prize in Economics a year or two ago. Fantastic read. And I really appreciated the careful, nuanced language, how they took a range of issues, economic issues that are going on right now, so things like immigration and trade tariffs and things like that, and really just parsed them and explained the different nuances and possible economic policy approaches. And so I really appreciated that book. So again, these are my top 10. So many other books I feel like could be on this list, but these were my top 10. I'm more interested though in what's your list for last year or this year. What are you reading, and what are your favorites that you've been reading so far? So thanks for tuning in, and happy reading.